Good afternoon. This is Justice for All, and my name is George Yates, and thank you for joining us today on WHKT Talk Radio here in beautiful Chesapeake, Virginia. On the show today, I've got Marjorie Cohn. She was with us a few weeks back. We were talking about drones and their the killing of so many civilians and so many targeted folks overseas with the use of drones. And Marjorie is back with us today. She's the author of another book called Cameras in the Courtroom. And what's fascinating about this book is it was written originally in the aftermath of the OJ Simpson trial back in the 90s. And Marjorie is a professor of law from San Diego. And she's recently written a new version of this book, Cameras in the Courtroom, to kind of update it a little bit because it's an evolving subject. And so she's joined us again today from San Diego. Thank you for joining us, Marjorie.
My pleasure, George.
You're a professor of law at Thomas Jefferson School of Law in San Diego, and you're the author of so many great treatises. And that I really enjoyed that interview we had. We were going to try to do this book and the other book the last time, but we had so much fun doing that drones show that we went over. So thank you for joining us today. You wrote this book originally way back in, 98, I think, in the aftermath of the OJ Simpson trial. And, Court TV was still on the air back in those days, and Cameras in the Courtroom was still kind of a, sensational thing because of the OJ Simpson trial. But tell us a little bit about the aftermath now in the intervening years since you wrote this book, and it's and now here we are in 2015. What's the status of courtroom cameras today?
Well, after the O.J. Simpson trial, which was televised, and it was kind of the national pastime to be glued to the television and watch this trial that had sex and violence and fame and all of these themes that really appeal to people. But what happened was, after that trial, and he was acquitted in the criminal trial. Later, he was found responsible in the civil trial, O.J. Simpson. But after the criminal trial, which was televised, judges in California really reacted negatively, thinking that the cameras extended the trial, that the lawyers played to the camera, and the judge even played to the camera. So they revised. They went through a whole revision of the California rule of court governing the televising of trials, and what used to be a presumption in favor of letting cameras in the courtroom is the opposite now, and the rule specifically says it does not create a presumption before or against televising. And then basically the new rule came up with 19 factors that the judge has to consider, and only 2 mitigate in favor of trials being televised, maintaining trust in the judicial system and promoting public access. But the remaining 17 factors basically allow any California judge to keep cameras out of his or her courtroom with no necessity for a hearing or making a record or an appeal. So now there are fewer. Well, there are some judges that allow televising in California, but and so it's a case-by-case determination. But the states, all of the 50 states, allow some form of televising, whether it be appellate courts or trials, or give discretion to the judge. The federal courts are not do not allow televising in criminal courts in either trials or appeals. Now, there is a rule of court, a federal rule of Criminal Procedure 53, which basically says that a court it must not permit broadcasting. And so what happened was that the Judicial Conference in the federal system came up with a pilot project, and this was back in 1991, allowing the appellate courts, some appellate courts, to televise proceedings in civil courts, and then in 1994 they had a report that said, well, the cameras intimidated witnesses, and therefore they didn't approve expanding camera coverage in civil proceedings. Then in 1996, the Judicial Conference allowed each court of appeals to decide for itself whether to allow cameras in the appellate arguments. And then most recently, in 2010, it started a 3-year pilot project to evaluate the effect of cameras in civil trials. And there were certain rules that were set down, and 14 courts participated in that pilot project, and in 2013 they extended the pilot program. So, and we're talking now only civil cases. There are no cameras allowed in criminal cases.
Well, it's
in the federal courts.
Yeah, and it's your book was most of your book, of course, was written back in the 90s, and you've got and you. When you read it, you kind of think, well, gee, I'm sure a lot would have changed since then. But, no courts, cameras were allowed in the federal courts back then, and they're not allowed in the federal courts right now. I remember I tried a murder trial in state court years ago, back I guess about 93 or so, 94. And I know when I first appeared with my client at the preliminary hearing, it was in state court. So there were cameras in the courtroom, and they show me walking in with my client and having the preliminary hearing and so on. Well, they decided to null pros the state court charges. They indicted him federally, and the case ended up then being prosecuted in federal court. I remember every single night the news coverage of the federal court proceeding would play the same footage of me in the state court maybe 6 months earlier before it had gone to federal court, because they didn't have any real new footage that they could use. So it was just kind of silly. People kept saying, gosh, that I saw you on TV. I said, it's the same footage from state court, from several months ago. Why is it that the federal judges have not allowed cameras in the courtroom?
Well, the federal judges are appointed for life.
And then the second question is, why doesn't the Supreme Court allow cameras?
That's a big issue.
Right.
The federal judges are appointed for life. They want to have complete control over their courtrooms. They don't want it to devolve into a media circus. And for decorum purposes, and also, I think they are concerned with Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. The Supreme Court, there are valid opposition. There's valid opposition to having cameras in trial courts in criminal cases, and we talk about a lot of this in the book. And I have to say that I co-authored this book with David Dow, who is a longtime correspondent for CBS News, and so it was kind of like a tug of war. He, being a journalist, said, let the cameras in all the time. Me, being a criminal defense attorney, said, no, the defendant should decide. He's the one whose liberty or life is at stake. And we ended up with this kind of very objective treatment of the subject. But we did come down very squarely in favor of cameras in the Supreme Court, because there are no witnesses to be intimidated. There are no jurors who are going to have to go back to their communities and justify why they voted for not guilty, for example. The judges would not be influenced by having to run for office again, because the Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. So, and since the law of the land is made in the Supreme Court, and there are many issues that the Supreme Court deals with that would be of immense interest to the American public, we came down very strongly in favor of cameras in the Supreme Court. Now, that has not happened, and as former Justice David Souter said, the day you see a camera roll into this courtroom, it's going to roll over my dead body. The justices like their privacy. Many people don't know who they are. Maybe they've seen a picture of Chief Justice Roberts, or maybe Scalia, but a lot of people wouldn't recognize them. And Harry Blackmun, for example, who was the author of the Roe v. Wade decision, the abortion decision, liked to walk outside at lunchtime. He wasn't recognized. Once he walked by an anti-choice protest, and people didn't recognize him, and he liked it that way. Now, they do allow they allow audio broadcasts of Supreme Court arguments, and that the kind of floodgates, I don't know if you'd really call them floodgates, but the issue came up when Peter Irons, who was a political science professor at University of California at San Diego, checked out the taping of oral arguments before they had been just kind of archived, and you had to be a scholar and check them out and and sign a statement you wouldn't publicize them. So Peter Irons checked out these recordings of some very famous Supreme Court cases, and then proceeded to publish them, and under the title "May It Please the Court." Of course, the court was not pleased. The court threatened all kinds of action against him and then backed down and nothing happened. But with Bush v. Gore in the year 2000, which was a Supreme Court case that basically handed the presidential election to George W. Bush, there was a release of the audio tapes, and this was after the proceedings were over, and this was the oral argument in Bush v. Gore in the Supreme Court, overstock photos of the justices. And a lot of it was very kind of dry legal analysis, but one journalist, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Tom Brokaw, said it was thrilling. And there have been others since then that have been televised, not televised, but audio taped, and then they released the audio tapes afterwards. But that's about as close, I think, as we're going to get to any kind of broadcast.
Why? What are the arguments in favor of cameras in the courtroom? I know that you, as you say, you got a little bit of yin and yang with your book because you're against it, and many criminal defense lawyers, if not most criminal defense lawyers, are against it. Some want cameras in the courtroom. And then, of course, the journalists all want cameras because they believe it's a First Amendment. What are the arguments pro and against for cameras for our general audience?
Okay, well, in favor of cameras, they make the First Amendment argument that there is a right of access. The public has a right of access to trials, and the press the freedom of the press is also in the First Amendment, that they have. Press has a right to come in and televise these arguments. It makes all the parties more accountable if the viewing public can see what they're doing, see what the judge is doing, see how the lawyers are behaving, etc. It's educational for the public, teaches them about the justice system. Those are basically the arguments in favor of televising cameras in the courtroom. On the other side is the Sixth Amendment, the defendant's right to a fair trial, which can be negatively impacted by cameras. The person who controls the camera trains the camera on a certain witness, and so there's editorializing that goes on. For example, let's say that a witness is testifying very graphically about the guilt of the defendant. The camera can pan back and forth to the face of the defendant at a certain angle and make him look guilty. And also, in the evening, they take little snippets on the news. They take snippets out of the trial, which are taken out of context, and people think the viewing public, who has not seen every minute of the trial the way the jury has, this is kind of the two-trial phenomenon that we talk about in the book. The viewing public thinks that it has a right to judge guilt or innocence based upon whatever snippets they saw of the trial, and so there is a threat in some cases to the defendant's right to a fair trial. Now, speaking of the OJ Simpson case, the camera really worked to O.J. Simpson's benefit. That case started out in the grand jury, and that's a secret proceeding where the judge decides whether there's enough evidence to send the defendant to trial. And it's sometimes called a star chamber proceeding. The defense attorney isn't allowed in there; only the prosecutor and the grand jurors. So it's really a very closed proceeding. No cameras allowed, of course. But in an almost unprecedented move, the judge disbanded the grand jury because of massive pretrial publicity and sent the case instead to a preliminary hearing, which is an open, public proceeding to decide the same thing, should he go to trial. And at the preliminary hearing, it was televised to millions of people. And Mark Furman, who was one of the officers, and he's the one who found the bloody glove that implicated O.J. Simpson on O.J. Simpson's property, and so
after jumping the wall,
right? The defense focused on Mark Furman's racism, and he did make, there were racist comments that he made, but in the preliminary hearing under cross-examination, Mark Furman denied having used the N-word in the past 10 years. Well, two defense witnesses watching this televised preliminary hearing came forward for the defense and turned the whole trial around. One was Laura Hart McKinney, a screenwriter who had lots of tapes of interviews she'd done with Mark Fuhrman, supposedly for a screenplay about cops, where he had used the N-word, I think, 41 times. And then Kathleen Bell, a realtor, came forward and said he used the N-word when in conversations with me. And then, at that point, the focus of the trial shifted from O.J. Simpson's guilt to Mark Fuhrman's racism and how he possibly could frame O.J. Simpson because he was a racist, etc. And given the makeup of the jury, nine blacks, I think there was one Hispanic, and it was tried in the inner city in Los Angeles, and there were things that the prosecution did during that trial. Blood disappeared, and Marcia Clark, who was the lead prosecutor, was very affectionate with Mark Fuhrman. In other words, embracing this racist. Led them, and they were sequestered for 9 months, and they became a very tight unit, and didn't take long for them to vote for not guilty. So in that case, the camera really did help the defendant.
And of course, the LAPD had a reputation amongst so many people as really an institution that couldn't be trusted. So when a couple of drops of blood were missing, was it Van Natter had taken the blood samples and left them in the trunk of his car over the weekend or something like that. I mean, it was something really
right. And then the nurse who was there was somebody who was analyzing the blood, and there was a nurse involved, and there was some blood missing.
Right.
But you're right. This jury from the inner city had seen up front and up close and personal how brutal the many people on the L.A. Police Department were, and how they could lie and use excessive force and manufacture things. So it was it all kind of combined to lead to a not guilty verdict. But I think that the televising of that preliminary hearing was really key to turning that trial in favor of O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, because what I'm getting from you is that your earlier comments about that the press can, pick and choose which snippets it wants to show on the evening news or the whatever you want to call it, with cable networks and so on. The press can influence the trial. The press can basically, depending upon who they want to win,
that's right.
It can put too much. So if they really want to, if for whatever reason the defendant is a sympathetic person, then it might well be the defense lawyer would like to have press coverage. If in fact the press wants to, produce those snippets. On the other hand, the ones that might be more pro-prosecution can influence it the other way, and then you use the O.J. Simpson trial, which, of course, everybody was playing to the camera there. You had the judge who, and all of this. It's the fact that the press can influence the trial with because people get to see the preliminary hearing. And of course, a preliminary hearing is just a one-sided affair. So you can have this overwhelming case of preliminary hearing. It's just a probable cause. The defense doesn't even put on any kind of a trial. And so a potential pool of jurors will come in later, and they've already convinced of the person's guilt because the defense hasn't even put on their case yet.
Right. That's true. That's a real danger. Now, in terms of the press influencing the coverage, Woody Clark, who is now gone, but George Woody Clark was the DNA expert for the prosecution in the O.J. Simpson case. And he would, and what happened because the case was televised, the trial was televised, is a whole cottage industry of commentators grew up. In fact, I was one of them. I worked for both CBS and Court TV, and so at the recesses before and after the hearings, these commentators, these experts would analyze what was happening, analyze testimony. And so Woody Clark said that I was on a panel with him, and this is very interesting. He said he would drive home at night after each day of the trial and listen to the commentary and take notes as he was driving, because they would say, the prosecution, these commentators would say, the prosecution, if I were a prosecutor, I would ask the witness this question or that question. He said he got a lot of great ideas for his strategy, the prosecution strategy, from listening to this commentary based upon the televising of the trial.
Right, because you had Ricky Kleeman, you had all these really top
Right.
criminal defense lawyers all analyzing it, all saying, who's winning and up and down, and it was entertainment value, but it was definitely some bright people talking about the case and how it was going. But OJ Simpson is now over 20 years ago. In fact, I think we just passed the 20-year anniversary not that long ago of the OJ Simpson trial. Since then, a lot has happened. I mean, Court TV is no longer on the air, right? I mean, they went off the air, didn't they? They just didn't make money. Whatever happened to Court TV? Because it really was, and that's the reason I ask it, is because when you've got Court TV and you've got gavel to gavel type, where they're basically the camera's in the courtroom the entire time, then you're not going to have as much worry about the press influencing it by just giving you, drips and drabs or snippets, as you call them. Whatever happened to the idea that we're just going to televise an entire trial like C-SPAN or something like that? I mean, wouldn't that work in the modern world? And then you wouldn't have that problem of the press being able to pick and choose what people see.
Yes, I mean, if there's going to be televising, it should be like C-SPAN from start to finish, without embellishing, without commentary. But the problem is that people they like drama. Entertainment is another reason for televising as well, and you mentioned entertainment. They like the drama, they like sex and violence. There was one of the Serbian war crimes trials was televised on Court TV, and although in Yugoslavia it got tremendous coverage, and people were glued to their TV sets because it was really related to them, it kind of fell flat in this country. And that's why the OJ Simpson trial was made for TV. It had all of these themes: sex, violence, a famous person, a Heisman Trophy winner, actor. And so that's what people like. And Court TV just did, it basically fizzled out. It became True TV, and True TV is really not at all what Court TV was. Court TV was, gavel-to-gavel coverage of certain trials with commentary interspersed, but that does not seem to be, they didn't really make it commercially, ultimately, although during the O.J. Simpson trial, Court TV was booming.
Yeah, I wonder, though, that was back in the 90s. A lot has changed since then with the internet, and of course, you mentioned in your book that only 32 million, because back then cable wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. And now, I mean, everybody's got cable, and back then cable was kind of different. Most people watch the networks, so maybe a Court TV or a C-SPAN. What do you think? I mean, you think that it would maybe have an easier go of it in today's world, or would it go the same fate as Court TV?
Well, I do think that if C-SPAN were to cover trials, and not just the big sexy trials, but also the normal court docket. If people really want to be educated about the justice system, they should see what happens in the courtroom, and those. If there were going to be some kind of, I think they call it J-SPAN, that's somebody came up with that term, which would be C-SPAN for the Justice Department, for the justice system. It should be gavel to gavel without any commentary, without embellishment,
and without commercials.
Right, and I mean, C-SPAN
because
covers,
it's really a public service type thing. It's like C-SPAN.
That's right.
If you do it like it's entertainment, you're not going to be educating the public. You're just going to be titillating the public, like the Simpson
That's right,
case.
and C-SPAN now covers legislative hearings that aren't all that. Sometimes they're really interesting and really grab you, and other times they can get very kind of dry and technical, but nevertheless they still cover it as a public service. That could happen, but I still firmly believe that the defendant should have the last word in a criminal case about whether or not his or her case is televised, because the defendant is the one who has the most to lose, liberty or life in some instances.
Yeah, you would think that I would know more about that. I was one of the I believe now, and since I've started researching this subject for your interview, so I was part of the pilot project for the very first televised trial in Virginia back in 1988. And we did not have cameras in the courtroom prior to that. So we did a pilot project where our county here, or city, Virginia Beach, and then the largest county in Virginia besides us, it would be up in Fairfax. So they did a pilot project where we would do some courtroom cameras here in Virginia Beach, and then we would do some up in Fairfax. And then after a year, they would interview the lawyers and the litigants and the jurors and the judges and so on to see, well, how did it go? And of course, it became permanent law. So I tried the first. It was a murder trial, a woman who accused of, murdering her husband, and it was sexy because she was a battered woman and so on. And it was during the same period of time that Farrah Fawcett was on the made-for-TV special, The Burning Bed. And so it was really a great case to cover. It was a sensational type murder trial.
What was the result in the case?
Actually, I was a prosecutor in that case. This was before I became a defense lawyer, and we convicted her of manslaughter. And it was a compromise.
That's because of the battered woman defense. She didn't get convicted of murder.
It was a compromise verdict, yes. And she brought in some compelling witnesses about his abuse towards her, and so it was of course, the defense lawyers were upset that they thought that they should have gotten a complete acquittal. So. Nobody was completely happy with the verdict. But the point is, I don't think that since then, I've had several cases where there's cameras in the courtroom, but I don't think anybody's ever asked me, do you want a camera in the courtroom? My experience with them in my jurisdiction is I'll walk in maybe to a preliminary hearing and I'll look over and there's a camera in the courtroom and they're just set up and they're ready to televise my proceeding that day. And
are you still prosecutor?
No. I'm a defense lawyer. I've been a defense lawyer now for 25 years, but I don't believe that here they ask us whether, it's certainly.
But if you really didn't want it and you thought it would prejudice your client, you could make a motion to exclude it.
Yes.
The question is, would that get granted or not?
Right. I think so. But I think that for the most part, these preliminary hearings now, the press just sets up and you'll walk there and a lot of times my clients will go, gee, I hope that, I don't know if you see that a lot and where you are too, but how a lot of times if you get a case where the person's just been charged and it's all this news coverage.
Right.
And it's, it's on the 11 o'clock and it's on the 6 o'clock the next morning and so on. And sometimes by the time the case gets to the preliminary hearing, the press has lost interest in it. It's fascinating to me how it makes all this news and then we'll get to the trial and they're not there. And I'm so happy because I don't want them there anyway. And you probably feel the same way about cameras in the courtroom. You really don't want them. You kind of feel like it's just going to there's really something, no good that can come from it, with all
Generally,
the
that's true from the defendant's point of view.
Right.
Yeah. OJ was not typical of anything. I mean, it was just a very unusual case.
Right. So where are you going with this book going forward? I know your preface here was in 2011. I think you'd mentioned earlier that your book was quoted in the Supreme Court or something. You actually had received some commentary regarding your recent preface to this book.
Yes, in 2010, a conservative majority of the Supreme Court overturned a federal judge's ruling that would have allowed limited television coverage of a trial contesting California's Proposition 8, which would ban same-sex marriage in California. And the five justices concluded that the proposition's supporters, these were the anti-same-sex marriage people, would suffer irreparable harm if the trial were broadcast to 5 other federal courts around the country. This is an appellate argument, not a trial. And actually, no, it would have been the trial that would have been broadcast in federal courts,
right? But
closed circuit, and the court's 4 liberal members disagreed, and Justice Breyer cited our book, especially studies that found that the camera did not change the proceeding. Now, of course, there are studies on both sides, but it was cited by the dissent. It's great to be cited by the Supreme Court. Better to be cited by the majority, but still, it was they did think that it was worthy of citation.
Well, I don't really. I'm kind of in the camp that says that it doesn't really change a lot of what goes on. At least my opinion. The camera's sitting in the back of the courtroom. After a while, you don't even realize it's there. I mean, it's there, but you don't, because it's not gavel to gavel. You don't really know what's going to be on the TV or what's, it's probably only going to be just a few seconds anyway. It might even be just a video feed is all that's really going to end up on the TV. It's not like you're on court TV and it's going to be every minute of every day. So after a while, you're saying, well, you don't even really know it's there. At least that's been my experience. What's most people say to you that when they're in the is that?
Well, there's a certain self-reporting bias because judges don't want to say, I would have judged differently if it wasn't televised, and lawyers don't want to say, well, I would have tried the case differently if the camera weren't there, and jurors don't want to say, well, I would have come to a different conclusion if the camera wasn't there, and witnesses don't want to say, I would have testified differently if the camera wasn't there.
Right.
So these studies are based on self-reporting bias. And in the OJ Simpson case, you could see how the lawyers were preening for the camera. You could see the judge, with his hourglass collection. One of the things I found really interesting about that trial is that when there was a piece of evidence that was disputed, and the lawyers on both sides would make an argument. Usually, in my experience, because I tried cases for several years as well, usually the judge would let the prosecutor argue, the defense argue, maybe one respond, and that was it. But the judge in the O.J. Simpson trial, and it was on television, every minute of it except for hearings that were out of the presence of even those were on television, actually. But instead of just hearing the arguments and making a ruling, the judge would let the lawyers go on and on and on and on, almost ad infinitum, and some people thought that having the case televised, having the trial televised, really extended it. And, of course, there's no way to know because we don't have a double-blind study, the same case being tried with and without a camera.
Well, and I mean, that judge, Lance Ito, has just been excoriated over the last 20 years, right, for his behavior. I mean, nobody really thought that he did a good job trying that case.
I think he was really criticized from all sides for that, but he did continue to preside. I'm not sure if he's retired yet or not, but he did preside for many years, continued to preside in the Los Angeles criminal courts. I
think Simpson was probably an exception, though, to most of these court proceedings. I think most of these other judges run a tighter ship.
I think that's probably true, especially after Simpson. They're much more careful, and a lot of them actually keep the cameras out because they don't want it to devolve into a media circus.
Right. Well, listen, Marjorie, I know that you just wanted to go a short time with me today, so I think we'll go ahead and let you go. We'll go to a little short commercial break right here, and thank you for joining me again, and so we can go over your cameras in the courtroom. Is there anything you'd like to say about your book that we haven't discussed today?
No, not really, except you can buy it on Amazon, and I hope that people will enjoy it the way you have.
Well, thank you. If you've just joined us, I've been here with the last 30 minutes or so with Marjorie Cohn, who, with David Dow, wrote this book, Cameras in the Courtroom, Television and the Pursuit of Justice. So go out and get this book. It's really well written, and and I really thank you for coming on our show to Marjorie Cohn.
My pleasure, George. Thank you.
All right, great. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
And so that will conclude this segment of Justice for All. We're going to go to a short commercial break, and then we'll be right back with our next segment.
Jesus, you're my superhero.
Do you want your children to not only sing, but to know that Jesus is their superhero? Then check out Grace Child Development Center, a child care center intent on positively impacting the Denby area of Newport News by investing in the next generation. Grace Child Development Center's goal is to partner with parents in preparing children for life. With flex and part-time options, low teacher-to-student ratios, and flexible financial policies, this is the perfect place for 2.5 to 5-year-olds from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Check out their website at denbykids.org. That's denbykids.org. Or call 719-1488. That's 757-719-1488. And your child will learn that Jesus truly is their superhero.
Jesus, you're my superhero.
Spring is back, and so are the Norfolk Tides. Catch the fun and excitement as your Norfolk Tides take the field at beautiful Harbor Park. Bring your friends and family to root on the Orioles of tomorrow today. Log on to NorfolkTides.com for information on season tickets, groups, ticket discounts, and Tides merchandise. Follow the Tides on Twitter and Facebook for updates on promotions and player moves. Tides Baseball, minor leagues, major fun. Good Italian food, daily specials, and a place people enjoy is Spaghetti Eddie's. Indulge in your mouth-watering pizza, pasta, subs, salads, appetizers, and desserts. Open 7 days a week. Log on to SpaghettiEddiesPizzaCafe.com and visit them at Taylor Road and on Eden Way North in Chesapeake for lunch and dinner. Like them on Facebook. Italian food you can count on is at Spaghetti Eddie's.
Okay, welcome back. I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. We're on WHKT, 1650 AM, and we got another few minutes to go before the 3 o'clock hour, and when we'll have CBS News. So anyway, that was Marjorie Cohn on Cameras in the Courtroom, and you know that I remember that OJ Simpson trial. That was fun to watch on TV. I didn't watch all of it, of course. Some people were. I mean, I think I had a job in those days, didn't I? So I'd be at work, but I know lots of people just stayed home and watched that or had the TV on wherever they were. So pretty amazing, that whole O.J. Simpson trial. So many books have been written about it, and yet we still talk about that thing now, 20 years later. So what else is going on today? I'm sitting here with my New York Times from this morning. Today's 1st of August. How about that blue moon last night? Unbelievable. A blue moon, which the next one's not going to happen, till 2018. And, wow, I'll tell you, I was out on the beach last night, just down at Virginia Beach, and it was one of the most beautiful nights I've ever seen down there on the ocean front. And so that's pretty cool to have a blue moon, which, once in a blue moon, now I know what it means. Anyway, this morning's New York Times, I got some interesting, there was articles on, the Donald Trump, and I guess Hillary Clinton is going after Jeb Bush. Is there any doubt that Hillary Clinton's going to be the Democratic nominee and Jeb Bush is going to be the Republican? I mean, all the money is lining up for Jeb Bush. There's 17 guys now are saying they're running for the Republican nomination, but it's already pretty clear who's going to be running against who. It's going to be Clinton against Bush again. New York Times comes out today in favor of changing or reforming the harsh drug sentencing laws that we've been putting up in this country for the last 40 years or so, driving up prison costs and so on. Now we're talking about having some of these inmates receive federal Pell Grants to take college courses behind bars and so on. So we had a lot of talk lately, and there's so many articles in the paper about how many nonviolent criminals are in prison on these long sentences. But the fact is, a lot of these people that are in prison right now are violent prisoners, and that's where they ought to be. So we have a large prison population, but I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I'll tell you. But a lot of these people that are in prison are there because they want to be there and they need to be there. And we have a safe society. And I think that that's important. So I think that when we talk about sentencing reform, we need to the problem that we've got with sentencing is that we get these people that are 18 to 24 to 28 to 29 years old. And we give them sentences that they're violent crimes, and these people need to be in prison. But once they start reaching 40 years old and 45 years old, they're just not likely to be as violent. You would think. But then what? You end up getting these two fellas that escaped from the Clinton prison up in New York. And here they were many, many years later and still violent. Some people are just that way. And here is but this program that they're talking about here in today's Times is talking about having prison college programs, and so college prison programs have more than proved their worth. And the present Congress is unlikely to restore the broad access inmates enjoyed to Pell Grants 2 decades ago. Now, the Obama administration's pilot program will provide temporary help for some of the people who need it, while also highlighting the need for a broad new policy at the federal level. So, I mean, if you're going to lock somebody up for a long period of time, at least give him the tools so that when he gets out of prison, he's not just going to go right back into prison again. It just doesn't make any sense. Of course, my favorite show is Orange is the New Black, so I don't think any of those girls. You watch that show? I think that's the greatest. I had to watch Orange is the New Black. It's one of my favorites. But then, so we're going to go to a short commercial break here, and we'll be right back after this message.
Jesus, you're my superhero.
Do you want your children to not only sing, but to know that Jesus is their superhero? Then check out Grace Child Development Center, a child care center intent on positively impacting the Denby area of Newport News by investing in the next generation. Grace Child Development Center's goal is to partner with parents in preparing children for life. With flex and part-time options, low teacher-to-student ratios, and flexible financial policies, this is the perfect place for 2.5 to 5-year-olds from 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Check out their website at denbykids.org. That's denbykids.org. Or call 719-1488. That's 757-719-1488. And your child will learn that Jesus truly is their superhero.
Jesus, you're my superhero.
Good Italian food, daily specials, and a place people enjoy is Spaghetti Eddie's. Indulge in your mouth-watering pizza, pasta, subs, salads, appetizers, and desserts. Open 7 days a week. Log on to SpaghettiEddiesPizzaCafe.com and visit them at Taylor Road and on Eden Way North in Chesapeake for lunch and dinner. Like them on Facebook. Italian food you can count on is at Spaghetti Eddie's.
Okay, so we're back. And, I was reading an article the other day about how liberals always win. We have this real liberals versus conservative thing going on in the country. We always have, I'm a conservative, or I'm and liberals have been painted for the longest time as these really, bad people. Liberals. Ooh, you're a liberal. You're in favor of all this. You're in favor of taxes and welfare and bad things. But what's fascinating about this whole thing is that liberals and liberal policies or progressive policies ultimately are going to win. And I think that is what upsets conservatives so much. I mean, just think about it. Almost every single change that we've got going on in the country is some new liberal policy that's changing that conservatives have been fighting against. I was talking to a friend last night at dinner. We talk about, let's see, it wasn't until 1920 that women had the right to vote in this country. Isn't that kind of crazy? It's almost impossible to think that women didn't have the right to vote in 1920. Well, was that a liberal view or a conservative view that got women the vote in 1920? Well, let's go to 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, when finally we said that separate but equal is not the law of the land, but that that we're not going to say that blacks and whites can be treated any differently when it comes to public schools. Okay, was that a liberal position or was that a conservative position that won in 1954? When we ended up with John F. Kennedy, president of the United States in the election of 1960, Kennedy made this comment in a speech. He said, "If by a liberal they mean someone who looks ahead and not behind, someone who welcomes new ideas without rigid reaction, someone who cares about the welfare of the people, their health, their housing, their schools, their jobs, their civil rights, and their civil liberties, then I'm proud to say that I'm a liberal. And that was John F. Kennedy back in 1960. He says, I'm proud to be a liberal. If someone that's a liberal, or you're going to call me a liberal, and you say I'm someone who cares about people's health, their housing, their schools, their jobs, their civil rights, and their civil liberties. And it's so amazing how the word liberal, or the tag liberal that we want to put on people, has gotten such a negative connotation from so many people. Being a liberal is actually a badge of honor. And we've seen what's happened in this country just recently with the rights of gay people to get married. And if we see the progress for civil rights, I mean, in 1964, it took an act of Congress before a black man driving down the road working for the government could even get a hotel. I mean, I had a guest last week on my show talking about the first Supreme Court justice in North Carolina. He was on my show last week. And as of 1963, that fellow was a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he couldn't vote because they say he failed the literacy test. And it wasn't until 1964 that if he drove across the state, he could even find a hotel that would have to guarantee him a place to stay. And then the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So those two acts, 1964 and 65, were they programs advocated by liberals or conservatives? So if you want to be a conservative in this country, you're going to be somebody that's saying, I just don't want change. I don't want change for the better. I'm going to stand in the doorway of the schoolhouse and not let the black kid come in. I'm a conservative. You're on the wrong side of history if you are a conservative anymore. It's such a badge of honor for so many people to say they're a conservative. But it's just not. To be a liberal is somebody that's going to advance new ideas, that's going to be progressive in their thinking, is going to try to find new ways to do things, to include more people in the process, to get more health care to people, not less, to get better schools to people and not worse, to expand people's civil liberties, to expand people's opportunities, to not try to stand in the doorway to progress. So I just don't understand how anybody that can not be proud to be liberal, and yet it's a label that so many politicians are forced to run away from for some reason. And I think that when one remembers the words of John F. Kennedy from 1960 as to that he was proud to be a liberal, and yet, John F. Kennedy was no shrinking violet. He was the one that stared down the Russians in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And he was the man that said, we're going to put a man on the moon by 1969, and we did it. And he's still revered in our national consciousness as a great leader, cut down in the prime of his life by an assassin. So why can't we in this country have a new dialogue about what it means to be a conservative, what it means to be a liberal, so that, because I think that we are on the right side. I think that this next election, with Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, and Hillary is drawing the lines out very quickly right now with Jeb Bush. If you want to be saying that you're some sort of compassionate conservative, you're going to be on the wrong side of a lot of issues. And I think this country is moving in the direction of progressive policies a lot faster than conservatives would like. This whole gay rights, and the whole idea about minimum wage being raised. The whole idea about income inequality, which is finally being addressed. And this is going to be happening more and more as we start getting into this election season coming up over the course of the next year. And we see these Republican debates, and all they're going to do is get on the TV and all try to show how they can be more conservative than the next guy. And this anti-immigration thing is just absolutely absolute killer for anybody that wants to be in the Republican Party. I'm sorry, but there's not a Hispanic or African American out there that's going to want to vote for the Republican Party anymore. And there's not enough white men out there to get these guys elected. The women are going to be voting for Clinton. The African Americans be voting for Clinton. The Hispanics, every last one of them are going to be voting against the Republicans because of their stance on immigration. Maybe Jeb Bush can come along, and he does have the credentials. I suppose, to stop some of the bleeding. And when you realize that the Electoral College really all boils down to Ohio and Florida, Republicans have a chance if Jeb Bush makes John Kasich his running mate, because if Kasich can deliver Ohio because he's a popular governor, and if Jeb Bush can deliver Florida. So the Democrats may well have to have a different kind of strategy to win some other states and make Florida and Ohio less of the battleground states that they have become. Because I think that what we've seen in the last several elections is that the whole elections boiled the election of 2000 boiled down to Florida. The election of 2012 boiled down to just a handful of states: North Carolina, Virginia, Florida, Ohio. That were close. Basically all went for Obama. So as we go forward, it's possible that conservatives can win the presidential election, but it's unlikely. Once again, when you realize that the arc of history is bending in favor of liberal policies and progressive policies. The conservatives fought against Social Security, and it won. The conservatives fought against Medicare and Medicaid, but it passed. The conservatives have fought against gay rights. We have gay rights. The conservatives have fought against the vote for the blacks and equal rights and civil rights. And the conservatives are fighting right now against climate change. Their conservatives are denying climate change. Conservatives are denying green energy and saying let's just continue to rely on oil and fossil fuels. The position of conservatives on almost every single issue is on the wrong side of history. Because going forward, I think it's very clear that we're going to see a move towards solar. We're going to see a move towards wind and more conservation. We're going to see a move towards expanded rights for minorities. Why in the world can't we understand that we need to have universal pre-K for every child? I mean, why is it that, I can afford pre-K for my children, but most poor people cannot. Why in the world are we not taking our youngest children and putting them in education programs early on? Oh, why? Because you know what? Because that is something that liberals want and conservatives don't want. Well, mark my words. Within the next 10 years, there's going to be universal pre-K for all children from 3 years old and up. Because once they start getting old enough to be potty trained and get out of the house, they should be in a school program where they're interacting with their peers, where they're interacting with teachers who care about them, and where they're learning how to read and write and play, and maybe not necessarily read and write at 3 and 4, but that's a little early for that. But in language, we should be teaching children. Certainly, we're going to be a bilingual society before long, so children need to be learning, Spanish at an early age, and we need to be expanding our opportunities for our youngest children, so that they're not at risk when they hit 16 and 17 and 18 years old. And we can see that is something that that's a liberal position. And, call me a liberal. But if a liberal is someone that, as John F. Kennedy said, cares about the health and the welfare of the people, if a liberal is someone that cares about expanding the civil rights and people's civil liberties, if someone who cares about someone's health, their housing, their schools, and their jobs, well, then they're a liberal. And the conservatives will say, well, we care about all these things, but we just want people to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps. We want to just say, well, you have to be self-reliant. You just got to do it on your own. But the fact is, that's just not going to happen. You can't expect a little 3-year-old or 4-year-old to go do it on their own. And so many of the poor people in this country do not have the wherewithal to provide pre-K and education benefits. So what do they do with those poor children at their most formative years? Everyone that studies childhood development knows that from 0 to 5 is the most formative years of a child's life. Why aren't we doing something about it? And hopefully going forward, we're going to see some more progressive policies. We've seen a lot of change just in the last 10 years. A lot of change. Obama has done some incredible things with the Affordable Care Act, which the conservatives have voted against, but it's the law of the land. It didn't do enough. And, of course, we have too many of these conservative Republican governors that wouldn't even expand Medicaid to the people that needed it the most. It was a federal mandate, a federal gift, a federal grant to the states, and they just turned it down because their conservative constituency would not allow it. But in the next election cycle, when those Medicaid funds are being offered, the governors more and more are going to start accepting them. And we need to find a way to accept that as soon as we decide. And one of them, John Kasich, he's the conservative Ohio governor, and a lot of Republicans don't like the things that he said. He does have, he said some very positive things about helping the poor. And a lot of Republicans don't like what he says. I think John Kasich is probably one of the very best, most formidable Republican contenders out there. I don't think that he's going to beat Jeb Bush, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is not in the mix and one of the most persuasive Republican candidates that we've got in the next year, because he's a kind of conservative, if you want to call him that says, I want to expound conservative principles, but I want to find out a way to help the poor people. And there's a way to do that. So conservatives out there, remember, you're on the wrong side of history. If you want to be on the right side of history, you need to understand that these things are coming. Universal health care is coming. Universal pre-K is coming. You can hold it off. You can stand in the courthouse door or the schoolhouse door and try to stop it from happening. But it's going to happen. So what we need to do is go ahead and embrace this change that we need to have going forward. I think it's going to take a while because we have a country that's still kind of center-right. I think that we call the electorate now center-right. I think the electorate going forward is going to become a little more center-left. I see a slow, gradual change to where we're becoming a little more center-right to center-left. And the arc of history is heading in that direction. A lot of it is demographic, that the white males of this country can't do anything about. But one of the problems that they have is that the law of demographics is now on the side of progressive change, and it's a good thing. And we do have the greatest country in the world. We have a system that allows this to happen. I'm proud to be an American. And I'm proud that to say, I believe in some of these liberal policies. I think we need to find out a way to bring out the best in all Americans. And so I'm hoping that we can realize that being a liberal is not such a bad person or name to have. And just remember the words of John F. Kennedy from 1960. So this is George Yates. And once again, thank you to Marjorie Cohn for coming on earlier in the show and talking about her book. You can pick it up on Amazon, Cameras in the Courtroom, Television in the Pursuit of Justice. And thank you for listening today. We'll be back next Saturday from 2 to 3. I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. Have a great day. Bye.